Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today we're going to do the Game Week 36 Ultimate Free Hit Team. Right, so in this video we're going to cover everything that you need to know if you are free hitting in Game Week 36. Right, so we're going to cover the difference between free hitting in 36, 37 and 38, and then we'll go through in detail the Game Week 36 fixture odds, right? In particular, the double game week fixtures, because we want to know which teams have the best double game weeks, and from there we can prioritize them over other teams, right? And then after that we're going to cover some teams with rotation risks, because there are some teams that are still heavily involved in Europe, right? And once all that is done, we can then use this information to build our Game Week 36 ultimate free hit team. Right, so hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. If you do enjoy it, please help me out and leave a like, subscribe if you are new around here, and let's get on with the video. So first, let's cover the difference between free hitting in Game Week 36, 37 and 38. Right, so I'm assuming that if you are watching this video, you still have your free hit chip available to you, and then the big question then is whether to free hit in 36, 37 or 38. Right, so let's talk about free hitting in 36, because that is the game week that is coming right up. So one of the biggest pros of free hitting in Game Week 36 is, of course, that Game Week 36 is the biggest double game week of the season. So we really can use this free hit chip to bring in the best 11 players for this double game week to start in our starting 11, and then on the bench we can have some decent options as well, right? And on top of this, we also get to have the liberty of looking at the Champions League and also the UEFA Conference League lineups to actually see which players are most probable to be rested, and also which players are more likely to start, and therefore we can get kind of the best picks of each of the teams that we want to target, right? And also at the same time, another pro is that we can remove some Spurs players from our teams that we actually have carried forward from previous game weeks, and that's because Spurs actually do have quite a bad game week where they play Liverpool and Arsenal in Game Week 36, right? So free hitting can allow us to remove these Spurs players as well. And lastly, we can remove rotation risks such as Mount and Havertz, because we know Mount and Havertz do have an FA Cup game to play against Liverpool, right, where Chelsea play Liverpool in the FA Cup finals, and possibly there could be some rotation in the Chelsea team for the second game of Game Week 36, so we will cover that later on. But basically, removing rotation risks is another advantage of free hitting in Game Week 36. Right, so let's talk about the cons of Game Week 36, and obviously we've mentioned this a bit, and basically there is going to be heavy rotation. So most of our picks are going to be based on our predictions or our guesses of who is going to start and who is, going to be rested. But honestly, all this is still, kind of a gamble, and it is up to, we can pick the best players who are more likely to start, but sometimes Pep rotation just hits us. Sometimes recently as well, Tuchel has rotated his players as well. So really, this is a big con of free hitting in Game Week 36. And also at the same time, most teams already have quite a number of doublers in their teams. So basically, they can get to 11 doublers without using the free hit at all. So in that sense, free hitting in Game Week 36 could actually be kind of a waste if we aren't able to fully maximize the number of points we can get from this free hit 36 team. Right, so when would I use the free hit in Game Week 36? I would do it if I have to take more than a -8 so that I can get 11 doublers. So basically, I am severely lacking double game week players in my team, then I would use the free hit in Game Week 36. Of course, as well, if I don't have the bench boost, because if I still have the bench boost, I would definitely use it in Game Week 36. Right, so let's take a look at Game Week 37 now, free hitting in Game Week 37. So now the pros of free hitting in Game Week 37 is that we get to target the teams who have double game weeks in Game Week 37, of course, right? So Aston Villa, Everton, Burnley, Crystal Palace are the ones that stand out, right? And on top of this, something that's really, really crucial about this free hitting in Game Week 37 is that we can get rid of the Aston Villa and Everton assets come Game Week 38, because we've just free hitted them into our Game Week 37 team, and once the free hit is over in 38, we would revert back to our original teams without the Villa and Everton assets. Now the reason why this is good is because Aston Villa and Everton have really bad fixtures in Game Week 38, right? They play Manchester City and Arsenal respectively, right? So poor fixtures for them, and we technically only want them for their double in Game Week 37. So a free hit actually really does that really nicely for us. Now, lastly, another pro of free hitting in Game Week 37 is that we can take 1 week punts. So now what I mean by this is we can actually go for punts on players that we may not have in our team, right? Maybe Gallagher from Crystal Palace, maybe Coutinho from Aston Villa if we already don't have him. But basically, we can really take a punt and chase rank if we free hit in Game Week 37. Now, let's talk about the cons of free hitting in Game Week 37 now. And basically, a big one there is that many single game week teams have really easy games. So I'm talking about teams like Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, Spurs. They all have really easy fixtures. So if we are free hitting in Game Week 37, on top of the teams that double, we would have to consider these single game week teams, right? And who's to say we may get distracted by the double game week players and actually miss out on some important single game week players that we actually should have. And if they haul, then we would essentially waste our free hit, right? So on top of this as well, another major con is having is whether teams have something to play for, right? So Crystal Palace and Aston Villa currently have nothing to play for, right? So really, if they're going into this Game Week 37 with maybe some rotation because they have nothing to play for, then we could really be hit by this free hit 37. And on top of this, Burnley and Everton we know are pretty much quite unreliable in terms of their returns, right? They're really quite sporadic in their returns, and so basically it's very hard for us to determine whether we would actually get some decent returns from Burnley and Everton, right? So those are the cons of free hitting in 37. And when would I use it? I would free hit in Game Week 37 if I don't have any Aston Villa or Everton assets, right? So basically to target the fixtures that they have, because Aston Villa and Everton have really good doubles in Game Week 37. Right, so now let's talk about the last free hit opportunity, and that's free hitting in Game Week 38. Now, one of the main pros of this is that leading up to Game Week 38, if we had not used any chips, then we would have all these players that we previously mentioned, right? Players from Aston Villa, Everton, Burnley, and Crystal Palace. Now, the reason why free hitting in Game Week 38 is good is because we can remove the teams with poor fixtures in Game Week 38, namely Aston Villa and Everton, right? And on top of this, we can load up on Manchester City, Liverpool, and Chelsea assets, right? And come Game Week 38, we would know the teams that are desperate to win. Basically, if they are really high up top, if Manchester City and Liverpool are still fighting for the title, definitely we want to load up on them. Teams fighting the relegation battle, maybe Burnley is still caught up in that, we can actually consider players like Weghorst, etc. So we can actually free hit in 38 to target these desperate teams. Right, and lastly, we know that in Game Week 38, all the games kick off at the same time. So there is potential for early team leaks, and then we can tweak our teams accordingly. Right, so now let's talk about the cons of free hitting in Game Week 38. And basically, it is tough to select nailed players. Right, this is pretty much almost the same for every game week. But the reason why 38 is different is because it is tough to say who is the first 11 for each particular team, right? And therefore, when it comes to a crunch situation where teams really have to win that game, it's hard to say who they would play ahead of others, right? And lastly, we would also already have Manchester City and Liverpool assets in our teams. So maybe a free hit in Game Week 38 may not be necessary at all. Right, so when would I use the free hit in Game Week 38? It would be if I had loaded up on Aston Villa and Everton assets in Game Week 37, because what that would leave me with is many players with poor fixtures in Game Week 38, right? Because Villa and Everton, I've already said, have poor fixtures in Game Week 38, right? So currently, this is how it's looking, right? The pros and cons and when I would use the free hit chip in each of these game weeks. So assuming that we've considered all these things and we still decide to free hit in Game Week 36, then let's take a look at the next graphic. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at some of the fixture odds in Game Week 36, and basically we're going to rank the teams in order of how likely they are to get wins and also keep clean sheets, right? Because this is going to help us kind of ascertain which teams would do better and return and their assets would return more points, right? So if you take a look based on the draft town odds, as always, I've ranked the teams from best to worst, and of course Manchester City is at the top, right? They have really high win percentages because they play Newcastle and Wolves, not really very difficult opponents for them, and high clean sheet percentages as well, right? And pretty much the same for Liverpool, Leicester and Chelsea, right? But something interesting is that Leicester ranks slightly higher than Chelsea, and that's because I think they play Everton and Norwich both at home, right? So that really plays into helping them to kind of perform better in those games, right? And then if you take a look further down the list, there's Arsenal, Aston Villa and Tottenham, right? So Arsenal, I still do feel is a pretty decent consideration because they have Leeds as their first game, and even though they play Tottenham in the next game, they have a decent chance of winning that as well. Then for Aston Villa, even though they have a good first game, they have a tough one against Liverpool in the second game, right? And something to note as well is that Burnley is fighting the relegation battle. So who's to say that they may not put up a fight against Aston Villa? So really, I think Aston Villa may face quite a tough double game week in 36 as well, right? So Spurs onwards, those teams really have quite poor double game weeks, right? So if you take a look, Spurs have Liverpool and Arsenal, right? So really quite tough for them already. And then further down the list, all those teams there have pretty low percentages of winning or keeping clean sheets in their fixtures. So I wouldn't necessarily target these teams, but if we do have to look for an enabler, then looking to these teams with probably cheaper assets as well could really enable our team to have greater value in other areas as well, right? So I wouldn't rule these teams out, but in terms of enablers, I think we can consider them from these teams, right? So now let's take a look at the teams with rotation risks. So on the screen right now are 4 teams with huge rotation risks, and that's because they're either involved in Europe still, or they're in the FA Cup finals, or maybe even both, right? So let's zoom into the first 3 teams that I want to talk about first, and that's Manchester City, Liverpool and Leicester, because they're all pretty similar in that they're all still involved in Europe. So their immediate game right after game week 35 is their semi-final second leg, right? So they all would travel to Europe and then have to travel back to England for the first game week 36 fixture, right? So for all these 3 teams, I would say huge rotation risks for their first game week 36 fixture, right? And then if you take a look, Manchester City and Leicester will probably have a reasonable fixture run after that. So I would say that the game week 36 second fixture for City and Leicester would be fine. But if you take a look at Liverpool, they also have an FA Cup final right after their second game of game week 36. So I would say that Liverpool actually has huge rotation risk in both of their game week 36 games, right? So and lastly, if you take a look at Chelsea, they're not involved in Europe anymore. So basically, they're just focused on the FA Cup finals. So if you take a look, they play Leeds 2 days before the FA Cup final against Liverpool. So I would predict, of course, major rotation risk there for Chelsea players. So players like Havertz, players like Mount could be rotated. So what that essentially could mean is that Chelsea technically could have just a single game week, right? We could actually see players just play, players like Reece James, Havertz or Mount just play the fixture against Wolves and then get rested for the whole Leeds game, right? So these pretty much summarize all the rotation risks involved in the players that we pretty much would want to get for our Free Hit 36 team, right? So with all this in mind, let's take a look now at our Free Hit team. So finally guys, here is the Free Hit 36 team, and I've kind of crafted this team to really target those teams with a very high percentage of winning and also keeping clean sheets, right? Technically, we would just want to really maximize the number of points we can get from this Free Hit team. So this is really going all out here. So in goal, I have Schmeichel, right? The other keeper, I'm just going to keep it at McGovern because he is just the lowest, the cheapest keeper. So he's just going to be on the bench. But Schmeichel will probably play both games. So we're going to have Schmeichel as our first team keeper. And then for the back line, we have Trent, Cancelo, Robertson, and Laporte, right? And we have Tavares on the bench as well. So I've gone for double City and double Liverpool because, as we all know, very high chances of them keeping clean sheets in all their games, and also they have good attacking threat, right? All of these 4 players in the starting 11. And then I've put Tavares on the bench because currently Tierney is injured, so Tavares could very well start both games, and at the same time, Tavares is really cheap, so an enabler as well, right? And then if you take a look in midfield, we have Maddison, De Bruyne, Salah, Saka, and on the bench, Dewsbury Hall, right? So I've gone for Salah. Definitely, we do have to go for him, and I've even slapped the captain's armband on him because he is probably one of the major candidates for captaincy, right? So for a City attacker, I'm going to go for De Bruyne because really he is one of City's best attacking assets this whole season, I would say. So De Bruyne, really good attacking asset. And I really think that he is in store for quite a number of points in Game Week 36, right? And then if you take a look, I want Saka as well, because as we've said just now, they have that game against Leeds, really good opportunities for returns there, and they have a good chance against Tottenham as well, right? And then I've gone for James Maddison and also Dewsbury Hall on the bench because Leicester actually have a really good double Game Week 36 fixture pairing. They have Everton at home and Norwich at home, right? So even though Maddison may not play the whole 180 minutes over these two games, he could very well play 120 minutes, right? And 120 minutes against Everton and Norwich, who are both really pretty weak teams, I would say that Leicester could be in for some returns, and Maddison obviously usually at the forefront of these, right? And if we take a look up front, I have Richarlison and Nketiah, right? And Scarlett on the bench is just basically, he's just a placeholder, right? So I've gone for Richarlison and Nketiah. I'll talk about Nketiah first, and that's because Arsenal, as mentioned just now, I really think they have a good chance, and Nketiah is also an enabler because he is really cheap, right? Just slightly over 5 mil, so it really enables our team to have greater value. I can afford players like De Bruyne and Salah, and also a very strong backline, and that's mainly because of Nketiah as well, right? So if we talk about Richarlison, lastly, I actually do think that Everton would really try to put up a fight in Game Week 36, and that's because it's their last few fixtures and they're fighting in the relegation battle as well. So really everything has to go all out for them. So I do think that Richarlison on penalties as well could be in for some returns. Right, so this is currently how the Free Hit 36 draft looks like. Of course, barring any injuries, if there are injuries to any of these players, maybe in the Champions League games, then obviously we would not include these injured players in our teams. So find some reasonable replacements for them, but I think the structure of this team is pretty well set up for a free hit in Game Week 36. Right, so hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. If you did enjoy it, please help me out and leave a like, subscribe if you are new around here, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye bye.